Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to discuss with you aims, and so probably first to say, going into working group 4 right now, and we are going to discuss now aims and visions and results we have established in or within working group 4, and what I'm studying is with actually thinking about digital transformation and innovation, or I put that as a subtitle, because we are speaking of a very heterogeneous working group. We were starting to think about, firstly, actually as well, about lexicography and lexicology. So this starts to bring together not just different types of how to address actually the things we are talking about, as well as speaking about nearly 90 people that are within that working groups. And I want to give you a little bit an insight as well on how we try to structure the process and not just how we did get towards the results. So I would like to think about lexicography on one hand in networked society and embed it a little bit into this theory actually, because it's relevant on how we structure the work process, think about or map it against the background of European strategies, and then think how we try to address the European or cultural view on lexicography. And that is what I would call a transformation and a change process within lexicography and lexical teams and lexicography units. And then I would like to point that out on the biodiversity and linguistic diversity discovery or portal. So just to show you how we have reached some of the results. If we speak about network society, we are facing connectivity, which is marked by decentralization and interdependence. Social innovation is one that is one of the next waves or cycles, according to Peter Spiegel 2015. And in the center of this is the V qualities. And I would not go into details right now, but it's let's say, what we face in lexicography, collaborative science, collaborative working, like it is, like let's say the prototype of that is Wikipedia on the one hand, and on the other hand, we would have the Brockhaus thinking, and actually what we are used to in traditional lexicography with our dictionaries and the scientific dictionaries. The Internet of Things reaches a physical and digital world, permitting the power of Internet to reach humanity. This is a quote from a network thinking website, and thinking about that means if the humanity itself, the society itself is changing, it has impact on the way we are building dictionaries, if we want to have dictionaries that are important for our work. If we are looking into different kinds of networks, there are internally oriented organizations here on the very right side from your side. So they are low in collaboration. These are usually teams like we know them from organizational process, and they are not that innovative and competitive. And what we try to approach towards is ecosystems of innovation or innovation networks actually. And I want to show you how we tried to get towards that. On the other hand, if you look into European strategies, and we were facing a little bit of looking into cultural diversity in our working group, due to several facts. One is we were starting to look into human-centered approaches, because in research infrastructures in digital humanities, like in the European Science for Policy briefings, there are several points that are mentioned that are, from our point of view, not addressed and not reached right now, which means working much more multidisciplinary, thinking beyond academic circles, really contributing to innovation society, and so on. On the other hand, if you are looking a little bit more into cultural diversity, there are two important, let's say, documents we are looking at, namely the Declaration of Cultural Diversity from the UNESCO, where cultural, linguistic, and biological diversity are mentioned as the core diversities that are the values of life, and they are values of the 21st century that are compared to and with the human rights. So that was actually why biodiversity and linguistic diversity seem to be an important issue, because if we are working on that, we can foster and allow studies on cultural diversity, and we can bring that together. And on the other hand, meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. If you look within Working Group 4 into innovation and transformation processes, we tried to get to this ecosystem thinking via implementing several task groups, small groups that are doing, that having, let's say, some common point of interest, and then develop and see how they proceed in their processes. We wanted to create awareness for gender asymmetric word perception and documentation via lexicography and lexicology. So what I'm pointing out mainly as well is, probably I should say that as well, things that are not addressed by other working groups and the collaborations with other working groups, because they are already mentioned during the day. So what we tried to do with that was writing papers and submitting presentations that are bringing us more toward thinkings about more inclusive lexicography. We were working towards awareness for co-creation and participation and experimenting with that. So implementing the human-centered approaches, working with design theories and open innovation, and implementing by that something towards citizen lexicography. I will discuss that a little bit later, what we have done so far, and Alex will afterwards introduce you a little bit in how we did it. We started to create an awareness for European identity from a content point of view, not just from bringing things together and discussing cultural view, and bringing together lexicography with GLAM studies and museum studies, and think about something I would call the post-dictionary. I will come to that later on as well. How we did that? Well, we were experimenting with advanced research infrastructures in the framework of the Area Competence Center and the Horizon Project ETI Engage. We were experimenting with interoperability and standards. We have heard that several times today within the framework of lexical resources and partners. And we were experimenting with methods and applications in the framework of networked humanities. And we were doing that mainly on certain topics or concepts related to colors, emotions, and plants. So not to address everything, but to getting into these concepts a little bit deeper and trying to make some more meaningful work or So if I try to bring that together and give you an example on the European strategies and networks and make it a little bit more visible, so namely the UNESCO Declaration on Cultural, Linguistic and Biological Diversity, the ideas on network thinking related to team culture, lateral thinking and virtual collaboration, the European Science Fund on infrastructures, multidisciplinarity and thinking beyond academic circles, and the open innovation idea of the ecosystem thinking. I would do that on the example on biodiversity and linguistic diversity. So we created a research environment actually where we on the one hand have offer a service where you could find or access taxonomies for about, well, probably I showed that in the architecture, and on the other hand, explore data sets, and especially we started with exploring our data set and offering our data set, and then connecting other resources to that, and we are offering a linked data modeling for that on the one hand, and on the other hand, visualizations for that. So the idea is as well to create a small cycle where you could upload your data and connect them to the others on the one hand, on the other hand, make use of existing tools that are available. The framework looks like that. If you get into it, you get some information about plant names, taxonomies, about common names for that, the language, if it's available, and you see there are quite several sources already, and a lot of languages that are covered. So regarding taxonomies, you would have access to about 300,000 different taxons. Related to the system architecture in a whole, we would have a researcher actually that is or that could be a citizen scientist as well. So we would not distinguish between unit or not, who is allowed or who is engaged actually in discovering, exploring, or collecting and working with plant names. We are offering a human interface interlayer, which I have showed you now, where the main access code right now would be the catalog, so the taxon, or the common name, but we would like to go into making access via visualization as well. We would have a place where people could work with and so on, and we would have persistent layers where people could upload their data already and join them. And we would have several enrichment layers. The CNS stands for Common Name Service, and that offers opportunities as well. So it is, let's say, a small workflow where people already could upload their data from a dictionary and getting into Europeana, and that was the main issue to reach. On the other hand, we started to think about European identity. I have mentioned that. We started to connect people to that and did it in 3 workshops actually with school children up to now in the framework of Children's University. And the result was that we are submitting prototypes for that, where we tried to ask people what would you consider is culture and how it is connected to language. So that's the, let's say, kind of the approach. We started to do some qualitative studies. That is what probably as well, or partly what Chris will tell us about. It is, we started to do some research in the framework of museum studies, as I have told you before, where we were thinking how are dictionaries metaphors of identity, and we submitted a European exhibition related to that, which is about to be published. And we thought actually how is, let's say, the documented world, or in the world as it is documented in language, connected to other worlds and to the real world artifacts, and how could you manage to do so? So to get actually beyond the word in a dictionary. We started to actually work a little bit more on co-creation in the framework of knowledge society and connected, and started with a big citizen involvement process, which started actually with a European survey related to dictionary use in the framework of how are people building dictionaries as well, and how would they create them. So let's say from this citizen science approach, then thinking in insights in recent and historical citizen involvement, because actually citizen involvement is in the humanities and in lexicography, let's say for crowdsourcing, for example, and finding data, nothing new. But we tried to find out how could citizens be involved in other processes in building dictionaries, for example, already in the conceptual phase. We were thinking, trying to work out and already submitted a first concept for actor involvement and co-creation as a case study in the Austrian project, where we distinguished between dialect speakers on the one hand, and on the other hand, global citizens and people that have migration background. We were creating and experimenting a participatory prototyping game in the framework of lexicography. We did that at a meeting in Barcelona, in Salamanca it was, sorry. And we were creating awareness of and experimenting with added value of citizen lexicography in the project of in the process of building dictionaries and creating dictionaries, and probably thinking beyond how should dictionaries be, or in a new knowledge society framework. And so, as a result, we designed a proposal for actually an open innovation research infrastructure where lexicography could be, but it was not the only, could be implemented, but was not the only thing, where actually the co-design process and empowerment was one of the core issues of the result. So we started to think beyond the dictionary, as I've mentioned, thinking beyond the dichotomy of nature and culture, thinking beyond actually lexical data just as dictionaries, but as Thomas already has mentioned, dictionary themselves as artifacts that are displaying culture at a certain point in time. Lexical data and dictionaries actually as a starting point for art, so thinking beyond how could they be used, and knowledge production in a networked society, dictionaries as proactive part of an innovation society, and so on. So there are a lot of things that are started within the task groups and that are furthered probably. And actually, these things I put here together are mainly covered with a term I would call the BOST dictionaries, as I consider dictionaries are, by definition, not at the end point of knowledge discovery processes, but a starting point. Thank you very much.